this. So Vicky, go ahead and get us started.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks, Dennis. Thanks to the club for giving Bob and I the chance to talk about hawks again after last week. So just if you can see the background of this picture, this morning 6 young Cooper's hawks just sat together on the fence. So I don't know what they were talking about, and they mostly look social distance, but I think you can't separate the young. I guess they have to socialize, huh? So tonight we're going to talk about the 3 accipiter species we can see up at the Hawk Watch. One is much more rare. The 2 eagle species, mostly 3 falcons, a couple rare ones, and then how do you tell the ages of Harriers? It's a lot of content. If you're fairly new to birding, don't sweat this. This took us years to figure this stuff out, and we still learn every single day we're up at the Hawk Watch. If you'd like to visit us, this is a repeat. Come up on the weekends, 11 to 6. We have picnic benches, so if you want something more comfortable, bring a lawn chair. It gets 10 to 15 degrees cooler up there. Today, I think the ground temperature was like 75, but the northeast wind was cold and it was constant. So bring a hat, bring mittens. Even if it's 60, you'll be surprised. You'll be happy to have them. Bring some water and food because you're going to get hooked and you may stay longer than you planned. We like northwest wind or northwest wind or north winds at our site. We like west wind and southwest wind for broad wings. Just pencil in the weekend of the 26th and 27th. We could have some good broadwing movement that weekend. On my phone, I have this app called Wind. Oh my gosh, I'm going to blank out on the name of it. But it shows you the wind forecast from the Romeoville radar station, which is pretty close to the Hawk Watch. It looks like late next week, we're going to start getting some southwest winds. That could be good. Today, they had 10,000 broadwings go through Hawk Ridge, which is north of us. But I think those hawks go west and then south to Texas. Just last week, we talked about how when you look at hawks from a distance, colors fade. You're not looking at plumage details like you might try to find on your fall warblers in the woods, but patterns sharpen. So what did we say the hawk was on the right? Look at that black outline, pointed wings for a buteo, a really vivid white band and a thick black tail band. We know that's an adult broad-winged hawk. The hawk on the right, I don't know what color that is to you. I can't tell, but I can see these lit up crescents on the wingtips, squared wings, a long dark tail with thin white bands. So I know that's an immature red-shouldered hawk. Tonight, there's only a few raptors where the patterns are going to be important. We're mostly going to talk about shape and flying style. So just for silhouettes, we looked at this last week in relation to buteos. Look at the eagle silhouette. We know these are big, broad wings that go out really far, pretty big head and tail. Accipiters have shorter wings, long tails. Falcons, kind of like a pair of flying wings. If you look at these wingspans, the lower number is males, the higher number is females. They're bigger. Just take a look at, and by the way, the bald and golden eagle are about the same wingspan. They weigh 10 pounds. Those are big, big birds. Sharp-shinned hawk, notice, like let's say a big female sharp-shinned hawk, not that different from a male Cooper's hawk. If it's only an inch on each wing, they're almost gonna look the same size, something to think about. That's why size doesn't help us when we're looking at distant hawks. Kestrel Merlin, about the same size as a Sharpie. Peregrines, Goshawks, their wingspan approaches the wingspan of a male red tail. They're pretty big. And also, this is the shape that we see going overhead in backlit conditions or in cloudy skies. We're not seeing any details. We're just looking at the shape, the silhouette. Again, we're getting a general impression of size and shape, and size really only helps when you see 2 hawks next to each other. I think it was Tuesday, there was a small falcon harassing a red tail, and it looked pretty big to me, and I wasn't sure if it was a young peregrine, but our hawk watcher emeritus, Dick Young, said, nope, that's a Merlin. And he was right, the shape, the hand size was small, and it was just constantly harassing the red tail. So for tonight, shape, again, if it's a flying plank, it's an eagle, right? Their wings are like planks, but if it has a longer tail, it could be a golden. If it has a shorter tail, it could be a bald. If the head sticks out pretty far, it's a bald. If it doesn't stick out far, it's a golden. As the small falcon, you're looking at kind of angular pointy like a Merlin, or does it have a rounded wingtips and tail like a kestrel? And hawks can be real shapeshifters depending on the wind. If it's a fast wind, they all look pointed winged. If it's cloudy, they tend to look bigger. It's kind of an optical illusion where they look bigger than they really are. If the morning light is shining on them, they can look buffier. If it's late afternoon, everything takes on a reddish cast. And what we like is like a bright blue sky with some clouds to form a screen so your eye just doesn't go to infinity focus. But we don't always get that. I neglected to say this last week. I'm so sorry I forgot. But immature hawks have longer wings and longer tails than adults. They look lankier. Sometimes they almost look like a different species. So that all these clues together will help you look at a hawk and decide what it is. Flight style for tonight is pretty key. If a hawk is soaring, in other words, it's rising in a circle, how big of a circle is it making? The smaller the hawk, the smaller the circle. So a sharp-shinned hawk makes a small circle, a goshawk makes a big circle. What do they look like when they're soaring? A sharp-shinned hawk holds its wings forward, and a bald eagle holds its wings flat out. What do the wings look like in a glide? We know harriers glide with their wings up. So do peregrines. The other two falcons don't. How does the hawk just fly, just direct flight? How fast is it beating its wings? Is it pausing? Is it gliding anywhere in there? Does it fly fast from point A to point B like a Merlin? Or does it bounce around, fly up, fly down like a Kestrel or a Sharpie? Can it hover? Only two hawks we're looking at tonight can really hover, and that's the Harrier and the Kestrel. And a Kestrel kites while it's hovering. I mean, if it stopped beating its wings for too long, it would sink. But I noticed that they do pause. Maybe they're looking for that perfect grasshopper while they're hiding. So let's focus on Harriers. Harriers are easy to tell apart in age in the fall. There's not really any things to think about. Juveniles are this beautiful orange reddish brown underneath, but they can fade a little by the spring and look more like streaked females. The females have white chests and bellies with brown streaks, and the males are gray. I thought that was true for years until this year, and then I found out that there are some male Northern Harriers that could be brown or gray or in between. If you'd like to look at more details, please go to those birding articles. They're really fascinating, but we're not going to see this age of Harriers very often. I think we saw one of these second-year males at Goose Lake Prairie once because it just didn't fit into like juvenile or adult plumage very easily. Males are a little slower to become adults. It's not an indictment on anyone or anything. They take 3 years to become gray, and females take 2 years to grow into their plumage. So you've seen Harriers fly. They have really long wings. They fly with really deep wing beats. Sometimes you can see a Cooper's hawk in the spring, even in the fall, to show territoriality. You've seen it where they just kind of exaggeratedly slow beat their wings. They almost touch at the top and almost touch at the bottom, but you can keep looking at that hawk and find out that it's really an accipiter and not a Harrier. They always show their upper tail coverts, Northern Harriers, from the side and from above. They teeter, they just cruise low over the ground. They look like they're not having any trouble flying. They hold their wings up in a shallow dihedral or a V. Those wingtips are long. They can go past the tail, and they can hover. How do we tell juveniles? Here's the typical Harrier on upper tail coverts. It's a pretty wide band. Like I say, you can see that from the side, but you know, red tails show that thinner band. They can show that from the side. But look at the kind of pronounced facial disc here. Look at the pretty orange underneath, tops of the wings and the body. It's not streaked. There's a little streaking here, but down here it's just not streaked. It's like orange. Adults, the female is lighter with streaking. You can see her upper tail coverts are showing. She's holding her wings slightly up, right? Her facial disc isn't quite as pronounced. This male, oh my gosh, it's like the prettiest hawk. Well, I think that until I see a red-shouldered or like a kestrel, but the wingtips are black. When this hawk goes overhead, the wingtips look really square. It doesn't look thin-winged like a Harrier. See the black tips on the secondaries? This Harrier doesn't have much brown streaking here, but sometimes males can. So just that's the gray ghost. The first time I saw one flying low over a cornfield, I thought it was a gull. I hadn't been birding really long. Like, wow, what is that? That looks like a gull. It was a Harrier. Quiz slide, you know I like quiz slides to make sure we're learning this stuff. So this Harrier is streaked brown, so she looks like a female. I'm not talking about eye color at all. It doesn't help in flight. Pretty orange brown underneath, reddish brown. We know that's a juvenile, right? Oops, I think I did that too fast. Everybody see those well? They look small when you see them perched on posts. They just don't, they look really small compared to red tails. If you want to go to a good place to see them, I mean, locally go to Springbrook. If Fermi was open, we could go there. But Goose Lake Prairie, if you go up on the observation deck behind the Nature Center and just pan over the prairie, you can see a real lot of Harriers perched and flying around and get a feel for the differences between them.
Hey, Vicky, Vicky, back to that one just for a second. There's one other thing. You notice how long the tail is. So even though the bird is really long-winged in flight, look at the tail is actually longer than the folded wing there.
Yeah,
Especially noticeable on the female.
Yeah, I think they've stretched out their tail to be a good rudder for the type of flying that they do. That's what evolution's done to them. That is a good point. And just be aware, look at how fluffy this undertail coverts are in a Cooper's hawk. The wind can blow those up and curl them around the base of the tail. But again, the longer you look at that bird, the more you realize it has shorter wings. It's made flap, glide like an accipiter. It's not going to resemble a Harrier for long. Just something to think about. So another quiz slide. We know this is a Harrier. It's got long wings, long tail. It's pale and streaked. So even though this is a really distant bird, I'm pretty confident that's an adult female or a female. Can you tell the age of an osprey or the sex? No, not really. We don't have to do that at hawk watches. There's an orange wash on a juvenile osprey like the first 3 weeks. A female can be more streaked, but this trait, this necklace trait, I was always taught that meant it was a female. That apparently overlaps between males and females, so it's not a good gauge of sex. So that's just an adult osprey. If we could see the eye color, if it was yellow, not orange, then we'd be for sure, but we're just not seeing that at the heights you see them at a hawk watch. I think one of the hawk watches set a record yesterday for, we saw 70 ospreys. I don't know which, Vic would know which, if it was Illinois Beach or Fort Sheridan. So a lot of ospreys went through yesterday. And we're seeing them now about 4 a day, every day. Another quiz slide. Well, I don't see much streaking on this Harrier. We know it's a Harrier. It's got a facial disc, long wings. It's orange, so I think that's an immature. But what's this bird on the right? This also has long wings, but it has a short tail that's flared. It's straight at the edge. The first primary is really short, and the next two are longer. That's a juvenile or immature Mississippi kite. I think there was still one in Minnesota a few days ago. Maybe getting late for them, but they may still be coming through. Very rare to see these in Illinois. I think they had a couple one of the first days at Fort Sheridan. We've had them in the past. We just haven't had any this year yet. Questions about Northern Harrier? Because this is so content-based, we'll take a little bit of a breather from after each species, but everybody good on Harriers? Any questions, Steve?
No questions.
Okay, yeah, they're pretty easy. They're fun to see. So let's focus on accipiters for a while. This group, we're gonna look at some perched birds too, because they're challenging for us. So you can tell we see more Sharp-shinned Hawks than Cooper's Hawks. We see very few Goshawks, which come later. Most of the accipiters we see are immatures, and we've never seen an adult goshawk migrate over the hill. It seems like the young male goshawks are the most likely ones of that species to head south. This is a nice chart that I found, and the people at Bird Watching Bliss were super nice, but just take a look. It's really hard to believe that all these accipiters are smaller than a crow. And if you look, what is the length of an American robin? About 9.5, 10 inches. The male Sharp-shinned Hawk is maybe the same size with a longer tail. So you can tell there's absolutely no overlap between a female Cooper's Hawk and a male Sharp-shinned. These two might start to resemble each other. They've even tried to show the straighter tail on the Sharpies and the curved on the Coop, which we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Here's a nice example, that same rogues gallery, this time different birds, but look at how the crows are truly bigger than that immature Cooper's Hawk. I think they're telling them what for up there, keeping an eye on them. All right, let's look at the perched small accipiters. Some people say that Sharp-shinned hawks don't look fierce at all, that they look scared for a hawk, or they look like parakeets or something. But if this was the last thing you saw as a sparrow, that red eye before you died, you might not think the same thing. I'm not sure I buy that, but so some people say scared Sharpie. There are a couple other features you can look at. You see how round the head is? And the gray on the head is the same as the gray on the neck. It's not pale, it's dark. The back is dark. Honestly, the breast barring, streaking, whatever we call this on an adult Sharpie, very similar to a Coop. That doesn't help too much. They're very similar. So look for something else. The tail feathers on the Sharp-shinned Hawk are all the same length, and the corners sometimes can look really sharp like this. The Cooper's Hawk, on the other hand, we will see way many more of these Cooper's Hawks. They're so established now in our suburban, forest preserves, suburban neighborhoods. The cap is straight, much more straight. Some people call this like a Roman nose profile or a Roman head profile. The nape, it's hard to see on this photo, it doesn't show it well, but the nape is going to be a little paler back here. So it makes the Cooper's Hawk look capped. So think capped Cooper's Hawk. Notice, make a mental note for later, the undertail coverts on the Sharpie and the Cooper's Hawk are all white. Then if you are lucky enough to see the tail on a Cooper's Hawk, the middle tail feathers we know are longer. So it makes the tail look curved because the outer tail feathers are shorter. There's usually a thicker white band on a Cooper's Hawk tail. That's very variable. And if you think about its behavior, it's diving into the woods, it's hitting the ground. This gets worn off. They can molt, they can look kind of messy. So that's not exactly a great feature to always look at. It's a supporting feature. The immature hawks are all tough because they're all brown and white, but we can notice a couple of things. Straight head on this Cooper's Hawk. The streaking on the Cooper's Hawk are like these thin, pretty teardrop shapes, but I've also seen that on young Sharp-shinned hawks. But they tend to be more blobby. I think you mostly see them as more kind of blobbier, thicker brown streaking, and the head is round. I think the feet on Sharp-shinned hawks look way too big for their bodies. I think the Cooper's Hawk looks more proportioned, but that's just subjective. How do you look at them? When we're seeing them at the Hawk Watch, we're not seeing any of those details really. A Sharp-shinned hawk tends to fly with its head pulled in. It hunches its wrists, or it hunches its like shoulders is what it looks like. So that means the head doesn't project too far past its short wings, and we'll see that better in photos. It tends to look small. The tail tends to look short and thin. It can look straight cornered. A Cooper's Hawk, on the other hand, it's bigger. The head sticks out farther. The tail can look more curved. We'll look at some photos that show some differences with that. The Sharp-shinned hawk seems to fly only from like beating its wing from its wrist to its wingtip. So it looks kind of fluttery, maybe like sort of like a fluttery kestrel or butterfly or something. Whereas the Cooper's Hawk seems like it uses its whole wing. So it has a little bit deeper wing beats. It looks really kind of steady in the wind, especially if it's a faster wind. Sharpies soar in smaller circles. They hold their wrists forward. It's like they're really kind of grabbing the air to get up higher. They're so light. And then Cooper's Hawks soar in big circles with their wings held straight out, as I said. They both flap, flap, glide. There may be more flaps before the glide on a Sharpie. Supposedly it's hard to count their individual wing beats. It's just that, like if you relax your eyes, they look more fluttery, but you can see the wing beats on a Coop. What does that look like when we're sailing overhead at the Hawk Watch? Well, see how the head is, he's kind of hunched his wings and his head is lost in the gully. Some people say are lost in the pocket. If we draw a line from this wrist to this wrist, what is sticking out? His eye, his bill, maybe his forehead. There's a kind of an S-shaped curve here, an S curve here. His secondaries bulge out a bit. His tail feathers look like they're all the same length. Kind of straight. Just in Hawks in Flight, they make sure to remind us that 1 in 10 Sharp-shinned Hawks has a slightly curved tail, and 1 in 100 has a pretty curved tail. There's not much of a white terminal band here. It's very thin on this particular hawk, and it looks like it's kind of blobby breast band, although we don't see that. If it's up a quarter mile, this just looks pale. It just looks like a little pale accipiter, and we have to decide on the head projection. Look at the straight across leading edge of the Cooper's hawk wing, on the other hand, where the head is definitely visible. It's not hunching in its shoulders. It can, but it just doesn't seem to fly like that. It's a bigger hawk. It's more in command of the air. Notice there's not really an S curve back here. It's kind of a nice gradual curve to the wingtip. This is a really pretty curved tail with a pretty thick white tail band on the end. And thin streaks. Again, we won't see all this detail. It just looks pale if it's up half a mile. So some quiz slides just to kind of drive this home. What do we notice on these two? These are all accipiters, and your choice is between Team Sharpie or Team Coop. So this is a pretty straight across leading edge on this hawk. It's not easy to tell about the tail, whether it's curved or not, but the head sticks out pretty far. Look at this one. He's pushed his wings forward a little so he can gain on this guy. But look at that curved tail. And you see how it's kind of damaged a little, and you can't see the white tailband, but I think these are two Cooper's hawks. We can see one Cooper's hawk or two migrating together at a time, but we can often see 3 or 4 or 5, maybe 6 young Sharp-shinned Hawks migrating together. That's another way to tell them apart. Look at this little accipiter. His head is lost in the pocket, lost in the gully. He's hunched his wings. If I draw a line from here to here, his beak sticks out, maybe his eye, a little bit of his forehead. S-shaped curve back here. The tail feathers look almost all the same length, pretty straight across. So that's an immature Sharp-shinned Hawk. Did you get those right? Another one. Well, I see the same straight edge across. The head sticks out far. Sometimes you can really see that sharp line between the head and the body, so it almost looks hooded. Sharp-shinns have that too. But it just seems like since the Cooper's hawk has a bigger head, you can see that better. That's a pretty curved tail. There's not much of an S-shape up S curve back here. So I think that's an immature Coop. And then look at this one. His wings are hunched. His head's lost in the pocket, except this one sticks out a little more. But the tail feathers look like they're all the same length. They're slightly curved. So I guess that's a Sharpie, and it may be a little bit bigger headed, or maybe just this angle of the picture that might be a female. We don't try to sex them at all. We're just trying to age them. And today the hawks were so backlit that we couldn't even tell what age they were. We had a bunch of, a few Sharpies move. Last quiz slide, I think, for these two. What do we think about this one? Team Sharpie or Team Coop? Well, his wings are hunched. His head is in the pocket. It's gray. This is an adult this time. The tail shows these really sharp corners and straight across, so I'm thinking that's an adult Sharpie. Again, nice straight edge of the front edge of the wing here, a little bit of a hooded look, maybe a curved tail, but the tail is as thick as the body. So I think all that together makes that a Cooper's hawk. For years at the Hawk Watch, I twisted myself into a pretzel trying to figure out head projection and whether or not the tail was curved. Now, I just look for this straight line, and then I look at the head and the tail. If I see that, I'm thinking Coop, and I try to find supporting features. If I'm wrong, it looks smaller, then I go to Sharpie. But for me, that's the most helpful thing.
Vicky, it's Bob. Just going back to that slide, the fact is that we would see these birds even further away.
That's right.
Those features are enhanced, you might say. Remember the idea of, how do you express it, Vicky? That
Colors
phrase?
fade and patterns sharpen.
Yeah, so it's actually, in a sense, easier sometimes to identify or at least categorize fairly accurately a very distant bird, because you're not being confused by things that you think you're seeing.
You know, Bob's exactly right. I forgot, that's a really good point. So if you flip this bird over and it's going overhead, the head almost disappears. It looks like two wings and a straight cornered tail. And it does look like a T if you use your imagination. Good point, Bob. Any questions about Sharp-shinned or Cooper's Hawks? I think this is a great picture.
Yeah.
It shows there two different flight styles. The head is pulled in, make a line from the wrist to the wrist. The bill, it's turning its head so the bill doesn't stick out. This Sharpie has a curved tail, doesn't it? And the white band is pretty wide, but look how tiny it is. It's just short. And the wings are right for a Sharpie. And then the Cooper's Hawk, it's trying to get away from this bird, so he's holding his wings a little forward, but he doesn't hunch them. They're straight. His tail is curved. He doesn't have as much of a white tail band, but it's curved.
And again, if you see birds traveling together, don't automatically assume that because one is smaller than the other, that it's a different species. You need to look at the other features.
Think about it, may be male and female, it may be, you know, siblings, we don't know, but it could be the same species. But what if this was a big female Sharpie, or I mean, sorry, a big female Coop and this was a male Sharpie? Okay, fine, they're different. But if this is a male Coop and this is a female Sharpie, they're going to be closer in size. Any questions? We covered that. I know that's a lot to cover about accipiters, and it takes a long time, I think, to learn how to separate them in flight. And perched, you know, if you just see them out of the corner of your eye and they're kind of going through the trees.
Yeah.
That's our view of them.
These tips are great, though. I never quite realized them until I saw these pictures in the.
Just the head in the pocket thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just think head in the pocket or head in the gully, lost in the gully, whatever works.
Yeah. Thank you.
Goshawk, on the other hand, we're going to see very few of these in Illinois. Look at how broad the wing is at the body. This makes the tail look long. It is, but it's also super wide. They do have a more pronounced supercilium, but we're not seeing that in flight. And also Cooper's Hawks and Sharp-shinneds have that too. But notice how long on this right picture, the arm is really short, but that hand is really long. There's really not much that looks like this hawk in flight. I think they're pretty unique. Rounded wingtips, the bulging secondaries, when this goes overhead, it looks like this checkered all over scallop winged bird. And it's hard to fit into a category. I think partly because we don't see as many. Now in this picture, because it's a close-up, you can see the streaked undertail coverts. This is just gonna look white from a distance. We're not gonna see that, but we'll see that on perched birds, how that can help. Here's a wedge-shaped tail. It's not really curved and it's not really straight across. And look at this wingspan, 45 inches. That's the size of a male red tail. This is a big, big accipiter. So we talked about the broad wings, the bulging secondaries, the tail's long and broad. We've seen all of these tails, the round, the square. Remember, juvenile hawks are longer tailed, longer winged, so the juveniles tend to have this long wedge-shaped tail. They just fly really directly. But if you see a big goss in it, if you see what looks like a buteo, but not quite, and it becomes an accipiter, it's probably a goss. That's the closest resembling hawk to a goss is a red-shouldered hawk. Remember we said they are the most likely buteo to fly like an accipiter? They soar on flat wings, big circles. All the accipiters glide with their wings slightly drooped. We only see about 4 a year at Green Valley, but when we do, it's pretty breathtaking, if we can see them. Perched, you can see this nice supercilium. That's tough to see sometimes, but mostly what you want to see is look at how broad this body is. Look at how wide the tail is. And notice these undertail coverts. They're very long and they're streaked all the way down to the bottom here. That's diagnostic for a goss. Look at the Cooper's Hawk on the other hand. This time it looks like this is the fierce one and this is the scared one. This Cooper's Hawk doesn't look very fierce compared to that goss. It looks like a wild animal, doesn't it? So look at the Cooper's Hawk, looks like a bowling pin. If you stop here at the undertail coverts, it looks like a bowling pin. It's a thinner body. The tail is thinner than the body is wide. And the undertail coverts are pure white. If you're lucky enough to see a hawk from the back, this is when it's good to take a scope with you into the woods. Look at the straight across tail bands on this Cooper's Hawk. I guess this top one is a little wavy, but pretty much they're straight. It's thinner than the body. Look at this goshawk tail. It's shorter actually compared to the body. And it's very wide. These black bands are thinner. They're a little wavy. Sometimes there's more white surrounding the dark areas. This is just a really kind of wide, compact, chunky accipiter. One quiz page. What do we think these are? Well, we saw a bunch of these. We know that straight leading edge, a little bit of a hooded look. The head projects. It's got a curved tail with a white terminal band. The tail's a little thinner than the body in this picture. Gradual curve in the back of the wing. This is a big accipiter with bulging secondaries. It's checkered all over. I don't know if you can see on your monitors, but it's banded across here. I think that's not a juvenile. I think that's a second year. It's not an adult either. It takes 3 years for them to become adults. Did you get
Yeah, Vicky, you should remind everybody, adults really don't migrate.
No, that's true.
Except in maybe once every 10 or 15 years, there might be an eruption of adults because their food supply crashed. But other than that, they don't migrate.
Yeah, Bob is exactly right. The adults are sedentary. Nobody wants the young males around though, right? So they're the ones that tend to move the most. And I don't know if climate change is going to make a difference, if goshawks just aren't going to have to move at all, or they'll be in trouble up there. Not sure. We're overdue for an eruption year for goshawks though. Any questions about a goshawk? This picture shows how small-headed they can look, and see the supercilium. Look at the long, wide tail, and the tail bands are wavy. Even from the back, you can see the streaks on the undertail coverts. They're really long. I had the privilege of spending some time with an immature goshawk in Karen and Bob's yard once, and these really stand out, and it's just a big, big accipiter. It feels like a wild animal. All right, let's take a breath. Let's go into the falcons. So they're coming through now. We won't peak for Merlins in a little while. We have wimpy numbers of falcons compared to the two lakefront ones. West winds really help, and they like to take a trip down the lakefront to migrate. We've seen a couple of prairie falcons. Something I thought that was interesting is at Cape May at the Hawk Watch, they've seen kestrels and merlins come in before sunrise. So do they migrate at night? They've also put transmitters on peregrines, and only to find that males can migrate at night, some. So I'm not sure we know as much as we could know about falcon migration. Last August 13th, I think it was, of 2019, I saw 10 kestrels together on the west side of the Arboretum. 6 were in one tree, 2 were in the tree next to them, 2 in the... So if they're dispersing in August, are we capturing them at hawk watches? Even, you know, and we're trying to capture the birds coming from further north, and they're still in decline in the east, but it makes me wonder, what do we have to fill in about falcon numbers? If you're trying to separate the two small falcons, if you get a good look, it can be, there are some good clues to help. Merlin wings are broader at the body than the kestrel. Kestrel wings are slim. Merlins have a really stocky chest. Their wingtips are pointed. Their tail tip is straight. If a Merlin weighs 7 ounces, but a kestrel weighs 4, but they're in the same size body, you can imagine that the Merlin looks more solid. We'll see in the pictures how the wingtips and tail are a little more round on the kestrel. Kestrel is light. It does bounce around. Its hands are swept back. We saw that today. A female kestrel just kind of went over the hill really fast, but she went down in the quarry. But she had those swept back hands while she was beating her wings. They both hold their wings flat or slightly drooped. They both can soar really high. A kestrel can like make a few passes at a red tail or a bigger hawk, but it doesn't like stay attached to them and keep harassing them like a Merlin does. When a kestrel's perched, it bobs its head and tail. I think that's because its prey is mostly insects and it probably doesn't matter if they see it. The times that I've seen a Merlin, it's like they're perched like a statue. They don't seem to move even if other birds are harassing them. One UK account I read said that Merlins do hover. I personally have not seen that. It doesn't mean that they may not. I think we've seen them pull up for a wing beat or two, but they don't like to glide for long. And I have not seen one hovering. Male kestrels, isn't this our most colorful little bird? So the back is red and the tail is red. That's diagnostic for a Merlin, or for a kestrel. There's a double slash mark on the face. Only the kestrels have this. And there's just a lot of color and contrast on this guy. Look, this one's banded. I didn't notice that at first. The back of the wing is dark. See these nice white pearls? That really shows up in the light. Merlins have those buffy spots in their wings, but they don't show up like these pearls do. Hopefully we've all seen one of these hovering and kiting. Female's very similar. She's mostly like orange all over, black barring, black barring. She has a double slash mark as well. I love this like marriage portrait that shows the kestrels on their box together. Look at how she's a little bit bigger, isn't she? She's a little chunkier than him. We had a resident kestrel last year. She was always stealing food from the male, or he was letting her, I don't know, but she was really feisty. Questions about kestrels? Hopefully you've seen these at Springbrook or Green Valley or anywhere else. They do eat on the wing a lot. Merlins, on the other hand, the joke at hawk watches is if you see a little dark falcon and you say, "Mer," it's already gone. But this one decided to land on our fence and Catherine got these amazing shots. So what do we see in a Merlin? There's no double slash on his face. Got a little bit of an eyebrow here, supercilium, streaking on the chest. Males are blue, gray, gray on the back and on the cap. Luckily, Catherine captured this buffiness on the wing and on the thigh, so we think that's a male. Just an attractive little hawk. Notice the color of the eye, it's dark brown. We won't see that in flight, but you might see that if it's perched like a statue in a forest preserve as you're going by. Look for these next to rivers. I've seen them on the Centennial Trail on the Des Plaines. I've seen them out in the open at Middaywin. Where else have people found them? Fox River probably, and definitely along the lakefront at the hawk watches. It's tough to age these brown Merlins. The females and immatures look very similar. We don't try, we just decide if it's a Merlin. But notice the dark tail, that's very different looking than we saw the orange tail on the female kestrel barred with black, or the red tail with the black band and then a white terminal band for the male kestrel. It's dark with these thin, like white lines. Underneath, Merlins pretty much all look the same. I think the immatures and females may look darker because they're brown. I think the males might look a little lighter. The back half of the tail is dark. Notice these wings are fairly pointed. The tail is fairly straight-edged, square-tipped. This, Catherine took some pictures of the Merlin harassing the red tail on Tuesday. This white band showed up real nice in the photos. Also clinching it as a Merlin, not a kestrel or a peregrine. Quiz slide. Look at the rounded wingtips, rounded tail. It's red. This is a very pale falcon. If you blow this out a quarter mile, it's going to look really pale with a red tail. You may not even see this black band. So that we know that's a male kestrel. We know this is a female kestrel, round tail. All that barring, the double slash mark shows on her. This one has pointed wings, a very chesty, stocky belly, straight edge tail that's dark banded. You know that's a Merlin. and it's going 50 miles an hour overhead. Another quiz slide. Okay, we've said they have a supercilium, they're streaked, they're brown, especially the immatures and females. The tail is black, straight across. What's this hawk? It's an accipiter, I know that, and it's an immature. It's got a round head, kind of blobby streaking here, and its tail feathers look all the same length. So I think that's an immature Sharpie, and these are about the same size. But also, look at the eye color of this Merlin if you're lucky enough to see one perched versus the eye color of a young accipiter is yellow. They turn red in a few years.
Vicky, the other thing too about Merlins versus Sharpies is the Merlin has, you might say, a big head compared to shoulders and body, and the Sharpie has a small head compared to its shoulders and its body. So,
excellent point. These pictures show that really well. Thanks, Bob. Again, this looks like a bowling pin, right? This doesn't look like a bowling pin. It looks like a little mini falcon. Questions about Merlins? I think their eye looks really big too in their head.
Vicky, we had a question while we're still on. The question was, Kestrels nest in boxes. Do any other of the species that we're talking about nest in boxes? I'm not aware of any. Are you?
No, I don't think so.
The only other one I know of in North America, I think the Appalachia falcons nest in boxes. That's one of the ways that but that's a Texas bird.
Yeah. Yeah, if you have a nice old tree in a farm area that's got some big cavities, I think kestrels would prefer that, but I'm not aware of the other birds nesting in cavities or wanting to use a nest box. That's a good question. Well, we know peregrines make sort of a scrape, not much of a nest. Like it's kind of flat on buildings and cliff sides.
Yeah, Merlin's nest, they nest in stick nests, usually in conifers.
Mm-hmm.
They're quite substantial nests for such a small bird.
It seems like in general in Illinois, we're seeing more Merlins year round. So, and I think they were already documented as nesting. So we may be seeing more and more Merlins.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about peregrines. Here, we're most likely to see the tundra subspecies, but the genetics of a lot of peregrines are kind of mixed. A peregrine has really long wings. It's broad at the body. It's got like this rowing wing beat. It's just strong, powerful. It can soar really high. Most of the time that we're seeing migrating peregrines, they're up really high. They don't ever flap. Their wings are held straight out from their body. They're really broad. They can glide. This says on slightly drooped wings, that's true, but they can soar with a slight dihedral. So if you're trying to decide, is it a Merlin or is it a peregrine, but you see the wings held up a little, start thinking peregrine. When it gets, like if we've had rain and then it's still cloudy and the wind is blowing at 20 miles an hour, we still could have peregrines flying around. They may not always migrate, but they're not afraid of those winds. Maybe a couple of eagles will fly too. Everything else gives up. Adult peregrines have like a sideburn here. Very long handed wings, gray barring everywhere. The female, or the immature, less of a sideburn and a lot of streaking underneath. I personally am not attuned to whether it's appeals or an anatom or anything like that. So if I have the subspecies wrong on these, I apologize. Let's look at the wingspan. It can approach a red tail wingspan. Prairie falcons, very similar to peregrines, except really pale. And they're like short distance migrants. They'll come down from higher elevations. I don't know if the juvenile prairie falcons are dispersing in the wrong direction or if they're truly migrating. But what you'll see with a prairie falcon is a very white, pale falcon with very dark axillaries. the time that we saw one of these at the Hawk Watch that Karen Fisher ID'd, it was really high up in the sky. This axillary plus the streaking on the chest, it just looked like this was a dark bar on a white falcon. So it's a lot darker on juveniles. The adults are lighter. The sideburn it's only one. It's kind of weaker. It's not a big sideburn like a peregrine. And the armpits, the axillaries are dark. They do bob their heads and their tails when they're perched, so they can resemble supersized kestrels. Gyrfalcons, oh boy, we're barely going to see these south of Canada. These are Arctic falcons, although one was in LaSalle County. Was that last January? You won't see these on eBird. It's a sensitive species. But you can do a regional search and then you'll see pictures. And if you know the area, you can probably figure out where it is, unfortunately. But juveniles are very gray streaked. Adults can be paler. Look at how wide the tail is. This is just like a goshawk, right? The tail is as wide as the body. It's very wide. Look at the wingspan on a gyr. It's like a red tail. Not much of a face pattern here. Gray overall. The gray morphs are the most populous. There's a white morph and a dark morph, but gray is the largest group in the gyrs, and the most likely then to visit the US just for sheer numbers. The white Gyrfalcons stay further up in the Arctic and probably don't ever leave. Although climate change, I don't know what's going to happen to those birds. This is tough quiz slide. I like to start backwards on this one. So the falcon on the right looks really pale, but it has dark axillaries and a weak face pattern, so I think that's a Prairie Falcon. This has a sideburn, gray head, gray hood. That looks like a peregrine. And this one doesn't have much of a face pattern. This one, it seems more white to the face, but that's a gyr. That makes sense? Did you get those right? This is a challenging slide because they all sure look really similar, don't they? But prairie, very rare in Illinois. Peregrine, uncommon. You'll see it more when it's migrating. In gyr, not gonna happen, probably.
It might.
We always hope. So, okay, last group of hawks or raptors, eagles. Last year we had the most eagles that we've seen for balds, and that's despite 2 adult pairs that were flying back and forth constantly underneath our view, back and forth to the Arb, to 4 Lakes. Seems like one pair won and got to the territory to nest in. We don't see very many golden eagles, and we usually don't see them till November, though we can see, we've seen them in September, but they peak in November. And we're seeing bald eagles every day. They're just not always migrating. Because remember last week we said bald eagles are really increasing, so we're gonna see more and more of them. How do you tell them apart in flight? Golden eagle holds its wings slightly up, slight dihedral. It makes it look curved if you're seeing it circle, and you can see it from the side. A bald eagle always seems to soar on flat wings held straight out from its body. It just doesn't seem to move off that axis. This I've seen in a couple of sources. I feel like this helps if you don't mind being silly to try this with your own arms. But a golden eagle, it's beating its wings, it's beating its wings. The wing beat stops on the upbeat, it settles down a few inches, and it glides with its wings held slightly up. So try that with your arms. Because I had a hard time like really seeing that in videos. A bald eagle, on the other hand, a lot of its wing beat seems to be more down. It can stop on the downbeat and glides with its wings flat. Like it might have to raise its wings a little bit, and it's gonna fly with its wings pretty flat. We're gonna try that this year to see if that's really true. But hopefully that's a helpful clue. Bald eagles, this is a review probably for people, but it takes 5 or 6 years for them to grow from this brown eagle, which is the most likely age that gets confused with a golden, except we'll point out how that may or may not be true. So a bald eagle is getting less brown on the head to turn white. The bill is going from gray to all yellow. The tail is going from brown to white. And the bird overall is going from a lot of white on the wings to dark, right? First year bald eagle, just born, very brown on the throat, belly, very dark bill, very dark head. This is the age, again, that people are likely to confuse with a golden, especially if they see this bird far away and it just looks dark. But you'll notice it has white axillaries or armpits. You don't see this on golden eagles at all. This amount of brown and white, it really varies from eagle to eagle. You've probably seen this if you've gone to the Mississippi or Starved Rock. Well, the adults are all perched. You can tell what they are, but the juveniles, the other ones flying around, goofing around. If you start looking, there's so much variation to the juvenile and immature bald eagles. By the second year, you'll see some molting going on. You're going to see a lot more white on the belly. This one has a white throat. Look at how much white is on the belly. So if you look up and you see what looks like a bald eagle with a ton of white on it, it could be a second year, maybe into third. It's more white on the head. It's losing its gray bill. It's getting more yellow. Look at how much that sticks out. Almost looks like a macaw. Third year bald eagle is losing a lot of the white. It's getting more brown. Still has axillaries though that are white. It's getting a whiter head with kind of an eye stripe. It looks like a little bit like an osprey. And then a fourth year, fifth year bald eagle might have some streaking on the head. Look, this one has an all yellow bill. There's some streaking on the white tail. So it's not completely an adult, but it's getting there. And we know what adult bald eagles like, so I won't show a slide of them. Questions so far about bald eagles? Look at how dark this juvenile is. It might look like a golden at first, but it's got this gigantic bill.
What do you think Vicky, what do you think the best first feature to look for on a flying eagle to identify it as a bald eagle?
I'm going to show you a slide in a second, which I think will illustrate that.
Okay.
I think it's the size of the head and the length of the tail. Do we have other questions about balds before we go into Bob's question? Okay, so how do we separate a golden eagle from a bald eagle? Golden eagle, the head doesn't project as far. If you accept my line, the head projects a third to a half the length of the tail. It's a much longer tail. This is more like a big, like red tail or big buteo. It's very dark overall, but it has a golden nape. That can look light, but to me it never looks white, even in bright sunlight. The bald eagle, on the other hand, the head projects out the same length as the tail. The tail is shorter. So if I were looking at this, even if this was a juvenile bald eagle, remember their tails are longer, their heads may stick out more, but it's going to look like a big, big head with a big, big bill. Notice the trailing edge of the wing on the bald eagle is straight across, but the golden pinches in a little bit at the body. So there's kind of an S curve back here. It nips in here. That's less diagnostic because I think I see that on juvenile bald eagles too, but look for that especially in adults. Here's a golden eagle adult. Notice the golden nape. The smaller bill, it looks like a hawk, not like a macaw. There's no white axillaries here, they're brown. There can be a fair amount of white underneath here, but from a distance, remember we're seeing these usually from far away or very high up, they just look dark. The base of the tail is gray. This one needs to molt. We don't usually see this at all, but the feathers go all the way down to the feet. The tarsi are feathered. Balds are not. They're diving into water. Maybe it makes a difference how they've adapted. Aging golden eagles is hard, but juveniles are pretty easy. For a juvenile golden eagle, you're going to see these matching symmetrical white spots underneath. Some apparently don't have this. So then you're left with the tail, which is vivid white base and a really thick, sharp band. This photo doesn't show it, but I've got a photo later that really shows that. So these symmetric white wing spots, a very vivid white base of the tail, and also you can see his golden nape. Look at the bald eagle. This picture shows kind of a bigger head, although he looks big, but his bill doesn't look as big. And I don't know what age this is. 2nd year? It's not a juvenile because the head's white. Getting into 3rd year. Molting. A bald eagle can have a white base of the tail, but look at this, isn't very sharp. It's kind of raggedy. It's thin, and you see white axillaries here and a white throat. You'll never see that on a golden. And then to ages, again, this looks like an adult. It's pretty much gray back here. It's dark overall, but I see the golden nape. The tail base is dark or dark gray. I think this, oh no, this isn't the one that's banded. And then Catherine photographed an eagle that we weren't quite sure what the age is. Maybe someone who's seen a lot of these can pipe in, but this didn't look vivid white. And these, I think this is artifact. I don't think those are symmetric white wing spots. So it's somewhere between a juvenile and adulthood. It's not always easy. You don't see a lot of these. And then what are the ages of these two? Well, this looks like an adult. It's all dark. The tail base is all dark. Can't see the nape, but it doesn't have white axillaries like a bald. And it doesn't look like an adult bald. It doesn't have a white head or tail. Because adult balds don't have white axillaries anymore, right? This looks like an immature. It's got symmetric white wing spots and a pretty white base of the tail with a very thick, sharp tail band. You can see this from above too. What are these? Can you age them? Well, we know that's a Turkey Vulture and it has a pink head, so that's an adult. They fly with their wings up in a dihedral though. If you only saw that from far away, you want to take a look at it. But sometimes we have wishful thinking. We think we're seeing a golden eagle and it turns out to be a Turkey Vulture. Look at this. This looks like a golden, right? It's got a golden nape. I can't tell much on this tail band. It looks fairly white, but I'm not seeing symmetric wing spots. So I don't think it's a juvenile, but I also don't know that it's not an adult.
Vicky, it's worth noting to Turkey Vulture that pretty much in almost any wind conditions, they are teetering back and forth.
Exactly.
Winds. And golden eagles don't do that.
No, golden eagles can fly in just about any speed of winds. Remember what their habitat is. They're mountain, cliff dwelling, cliff nesting eagles. I don't know if even a wind would beat them. But yeah, like Bob said, Turkey vultures teeter around a lot. They get blown. Today they were getting blown from the north wind. They couldn't fly against it at all. They're really light. They're mostly feathers. And a golden eagle weighs 10 pounds. It's a very, very big bird. I guess the only bird bigger than the eagles are the condors, right? Questions about golden eagles? I love this photo. It shows the really white base of the tail with the nice black band and the symmetric white wing spots. And he's getting conquered, I guess, by an adult bald eagle. So juvenile golden eagles aren't hard. I don't think. Questions about eagles? We're done, you guys. Questions in general? Thanks everybody for attending. Thanks for letting us have this opportunity to share our little experience with hawks. Thanks to Catherine for all of your amazing photos.
Well, thank you, Vicky. That's quite a tour de force, quite a
yeah.
impressive array of photos too.
It's a lot in one setting, so.
Yeah, those photos were a real treat, so all the photographers.
Oh yeah, they do.
Good job finding them all and all the people who contributed. I really appreciate it.
Anybody have questions?
I just want to say it's taken me, 6, 7 years, and I'm finally starting to feel comfortable with what I'm seeing. So it's not something that comes easy. It takes a lot of time and seeing them a lot of flying and in a lot of different conditions.
That's
And,
right.
You know, so it's something you've really got to practice.
Exactly. And I still make plenty of mistakes, and I still am learning every single day. So
Same here.
Another thing is when you first spot them in the air, they often look like just a speck of pepper.
that's right. It's right. And you're trying to see, what does that look like? Are the wings long? Yeah, Judy's exactly right. We see them really far away sometimes. And then they remain sort of unidentified, unknown raptor, unknown buteo, unknown accipiter.
And on the pictures, these birds are truly specks. I mean, I've got my zoom maxed out, and then I crop them. So
You have a 600 lens.
yeah, so they're just teeny tiny, and then and I got my zoom, and then I crop them, and even then, it's a hit or miss.
No, you do a great job. And then is your camera going to actually be able to focus on the speck in the blue sky, right?
Yeah, finding it.
Yeah. Any questions? It's a lot to cover. I know that. I'd say come out and visit us at the Hawk Watch so you can actually see hawks flying for minutes at a time instead of just glimpses of them. Especially the local hawks, when they fly around, you can really get a good feel for how they maneuver. So please come visit us at the Hawk Watch.
We had 7 up this morning, 7 red tails playing around the hill.
Yeah.
Vicky,
Not migrating.
Vicky, I
Yes.
had a question about golden eagles here. So they're very, very difficult to see them or find them in any. You have to go out west to see them mainly.
Well, actually, yeah, in Illinois, I should have said that they are very, very rare. But if you get cabin fever, in like January, February, go up to Savannah, Illinois by Lost Mound. And there are some pretty regular golden eagles wintering there. And that's where Bob and I went in last January because, I don't know, cabin fever. So we were able to see a golden, but there's a family that lives there that are avid birders, and they see them every single day. So I would stay at the Savannah Inn in Savannah. That's a good chance to see rough-legged hawks. Otherwise in Illinois, they're pretty scarce to find, but definitely you can look at, you may see 30 bald eagles spread out in the sky, but then you'll see that one that's soaring in a curved line, and then you see the white tail base, and you're like, yes, golden eagle. So I think that's the closest place to look. In the field guides, it says that they winter in southern Illinois, and I just don't have experience with that. I think there was a pair in Iroquois County last year or the year before that people were going to find. But that Savannah trip is really nice. You'll see swans, you'll see, waterfall. It's nice to be on the Mississippi.
There's a reason too why they winter along the river, because of the bluffs. They're mountain birds, so they like to winter in habitat that resembles where they spend the summer. Use the thermals and so forth along the bluffs there on the Mississippi River. In our flatlands, there's not many thermals in the winter. That's for sure.
Right. And Jean, if you were on eBird, I dropped a pin where we were viewing the golden eagles from. It's up high on a bluff, and it's a high road, but no one goes on it. And you can scope from there and look north and see all the eagles.
Okay. Wow. All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
A lot of work there, girl.
Well, and the hawk watching is a lot of work, as Catherine pointed out. Your eyes get really tired after a few hours, so.
Well, especially if the wind's blowing.
Yep.
Thank you,
Other
Vicky.
questions?
This was wonderful. Thanks,
everybody.
enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
There's a lot of work pulling it together, so I'm glad you can get back out onto the hill and not have to worry about this for a while.
Thanks for your support, Steve. You've been so helpful. So thank you very much. Thank you, Bob.
Up on YouTube pretty soon, so those who couldn't attend.
Yep, it'll be up on YouTube.
Plenty to review, of course, too. So.
Thank you
Yeah,
all.
because we went through everything fast.